In the year 1775, the world was changing. Across the Atlantic Ocean, in the 13 American colonies, people were growing restless. For years, they had lived under the rule of King George III of Britain. They paid high taxes, followed strict trade laws, and had no voice in the British Parliament. The famous cry began to echo through the colonies: no taxation without representation. The anger started small, with protests, letters, and boycotts, but soon, tension turned into rebellion. In Boston, things were boiling. British soldiers were stationed there to keep control. The people hated their presence. Then came March 5, 1770, the Boston Massacre, when British soldiers fired on unarmed colonists. 5 men died, and it became a symbol of British cruelty. A few years later in 1773, the anger exploded again. The British imposed a tax on tea. In response, a group of rebels disguised themselves as Native Americans and boarded British ships in Boston Harbor. They threw hundreds of chests of tea into the water. This was called the Boston Tea Party, Malski, and the Boston Stand. A bold act of defiance that shocked the world. Britain responded harshly. They closed the port of Boston and sent more soldiers. The colonies realized this was no longer just about taxes, it was about freedom. By April 1775, the first shots were fired at Lexington and Concord. Nobody knew who fired the first bullet, but that single gunshot became known as the shot heard around the world. The war had begun. Farmers, blacksmiths, and everyday people picked up weapons to fight against one of the strongest armies in the world, the British Redcoats. The American Revolution had started, and there was no turning back. After the first gunfire at Lexington and Concord in 1775, the colonies realized that this was not a small protest anymore. It was a full-scale war for independence. The colonial leaders gathered in Philadelphia for the Second Continental Congress. There, they made a historic decision to form their own army, called the Continental Army, and to choose a commander to lead it. Their choice was a tall, brave Virginian named George Washington. Washington knew this war would not be easy. The Americans had courage, but they lacked weapons, training, and money. On the other side, Britain had the world's most powerful navy and one of the strongest armies. In the summer of 1775, Washington took command near Boston. His soldiers were farmers and workers who had never fought in a real war, but they had something stronger than weapons: the spirit of freedom. Meanwhile, the British were confident. General Thomas Gage and his red-coated soldiers planned to crush the rebellion quickly. But at the Battle of Bunker Hill, the Americans fought fiercely. Though they eventually lost the ground, the heavy British losses shocked everyone. It proved that the colonists could stand against the mighty empire. As the fighting spread, people across the colonies started choosing sides. Some supported independence, while others stayed loyal to Britain. Families and towns were divided. By the end of 1775, George Washington's army surrounded Boston. The British troops, trapped and running out of supplies, were forced to leave the city in March 1776. The victory gave hope to the Americans. For the first time, they believed they could win. But the biggest decision was still ahead: whether to break away from Britain completely and declare themselves a new nation. That moment. By 1776, the flames of rebellion were burning brighter than ever. The colonies had been fighting the British for over a year, but they still had not officially declared independence. Many leaders believed it was time to take that bold step, to create a new nation, free from the rule of the British crown. In Philadelphia, delegates from all 13 colonies gathered once again at the Continental Congress. Among them was a young, passionate lawyer from Virginia, Thomas Jefferson. He was chosen to write a document that would change history forever. For days, Jefferson sat in his room writing by candlelight. He wrote about freedom, equality, and the right of people to govern themselves. His words carried the spirit of every man and woman who dreamed of liberty. On July 4, 1776, the Declaration of Independence was approved. It began with these immortal words: "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal." With that, the 13 colonies declared themselves the United States of America. The moment was filled with both joy and fear. Joy for freedom, fear for the war that would surely follow. When the news reached King George III, he was furious. To him, the colonists were traitors. Britain sent thousands of new troops and powerful warships to crush the rebellion once and for all. Soon after, the British attacked New York City. Washington's army was outnumbered and poorly armed. They fought bravely, but were forced to retreat again and again. The winter of 1776 was harsh. Many soldiers had no shoes, no blankets, and little food. Some even left the army. But George Washington refused to give up. He knew that freedom demanded sacrifice. Then, on a freezing Christmas night, December 25, 1776, he made a daring move, crossing the icy Delaware River with his men. At dawn, they surprised the British forces at Trenton and won a stunning victory. It was a small battle, but it gave the Revolution new life. One of the world's most powerful armies. The news spread across the world, and especially to France. France had been watching the war carefully. They had once lost to Britain in earlier wars, and now they saw a chance to weaken their old enemy. After Saratoga, France officially joined the American cause. In 1778, the French king, Louis XVI, signed an alliance with the United States, promising soldiers, weapons, and naval support. For the first time, America was no longer alone. But even with French help, the struggle was far from over. During the harsh winter of 1777-1778, Washington's army camped at Valley Forge in Pennsylvania. The cold was unbearable. Soldiers had no shoes, little food, and many fell sick. Some even froze to death. Yet, instead of breaking, Washington's army grew stronger. Under the training of a Prussian officer, Baron von Steuben, the soldiers learned discipline and tactics. When spring arrived, they were no longer farmers with guns. They were a real army. By 1778, the war had turned. The Americans had new allies, new strength, and new hope. The dream of freedom was alive, and the fight for independence was now a global struggle. But the hardest battles were still to come. The British were shifting their focus to the south, planning to crush the rebellion once and for all. The next chapter would decide the fate of America.
By 1779, the war had raged for 4 long years. Both sides were exhausted. Towns were burned, families torn apart, and the dream of freedom hung by a thread. The British changed their strategy. They turned their focus to the southern colonies, believing they could gather support from loyalists there and slowly crush the rebellion from the south upward. In 1778, British forces captured Savannah, Georgia, and by 1780 they seized Charleston, South Carolina, one of the biggest American defeats of the war. Thousands of American soldiers were taken prisoner. It seemed the revolution was fading. But then, a new wave of resistance rose in the South, led by brave fighters like Francis Marion, known as the Swamp Fox, who attacked the British using quick surprise tactics. Meanwhile, General George Washington continued to hold the North. He was waiting for the perfect moment, the one chance to strike a final decisive blow. That moment came in 1781. British General Charles Cornwallis moved his army to Yorktown, Virginia, to rest and resupply. But Washington saw an opportunity. With the help of French General Rochambeau and the French Navy under Admiral de Grasse, they planned a massive trap. In September 1781, the French fleet blocked the British escape by sea, while Washington's and Rochambeau's armies surrounded Yorktown by land. Cannons thundered day and night. The British were trapped with no food, no reinforcements, and no way out. After weeks of relentless bombardment, on October 19, 1781, General Cornwallis surrendered his entire army. The war was effectively over. When news reached London, silence filled the British Parliament. The world's greatest empire had been defeated by farmers, blacksmiths, and dreamers who refused to live without freedom. For George Washington and his soldiers, it was a victory not just of weapons, but of will. The impossible had been done. But though the fighting had ended, the peace had yet to be signed. One final chapter remained: the creation of a new, independent nation. After the surrender at Yorktown in 1781, the war was practically over. But the peace was not yet official. Thousands of soldiers still stood on both sides, waiting for the final word that would decide the future of America. In Britain, the defeat shocked the empire. Parliament debated for months, and the people grew tired of the endless war. Finally, the British government decided it was time to negotiate peace. Across the ocean, the leaders of the new America, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, and John Jay, traveled to Paris to begin talks with British officials. The meetings were long and tense. Every word mattered. Every decision would shape the world's future. After many months of negotiation, on September 3, 1783, both sides signed the Treaty of Paris. The treaty officially recognized the United States of America as a free and independent nation. Its borders were drawn from the Atlantic Ocean to the Mississippi River. The war that began with gunfire at Lexington and Concord had finally ended with ink on paper. When the news reached America, celebrations erupted across the land. Church bells rang, cannons fired, and people filled the streets with joy. After 8 long years of struggle, freedom had been won. That winter, George Washington gathered his officers one last time. With tears in his eyes, he thanked them for their courage and sacrifice. Then he resigned as commander of the army, returning to his home at Mount Vernon. He did not seek power or crown. He simply wanted peace. The world watched in awe. A nation born out of rebellion had chosen democracy over monarchy, liberty over tyranny, and hope over fear. The American Revolution had not only created a new country, it had inspired the world. From Europe to Latin America, from Asia to Africa, people began to believe that freedom was possible. And so, in 1783, the story of America truly began. A nation built on courage, unity, and the eternal dream of independence.